Hey guys, my name's Bethany and welcome to another video. It is day, I believe, 7 of Vlogmas, and today we're going to be taking a look back at all of the fantastic books that I saw come out all throughout 2020 that I just didn't get the chance to read or buy. And this may include books that are on my bookshelf that came out this year or just never were bought, and I really regret that I didn't get to them. So let's jump in and see which books I really wanted to read in 2020 but missed and didn't get around to them. First up, we have Felix Ever After by Caste and Calendar, and it is about a transgender teen that is grappling with their self-identity all while falling in love for the very first time. He's also having to deal with someone who is at his school who he doesn't know who it is yet, has released his dead name to the entire school population. One of my goals for 2020, especially from probably May on, was to diversify my reading. I looked back at what I had been reading over the past few years and the beginning of the year, and I just realized that basically I was reading books by white people and straight people, and that's pretty much it. So I wanted to diversify my reading, and I wanted to bring in different cultures, different races, different genders, and even different sexes and sexual orientations. I did read a few books that dealt with transgender issues and the topic of being a transgender person, but I really wanted to get into this one and I just really didn't have time to. It is definitely going to be one that I'm buying for 2021. This year I managed to read a book that was called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and she released a sequel which was Good Girl Bad Blood, and I didn't get around to the sequel. I loved the first one and I really want to pick up the sequel, and it sounds like it takes place just a little while after the first one happened, so I would be really interested to see where the characters go. And the first one follows Pippa. She is a teen in a smaller town, and one of their own was murdered several years back, and her name was Andy, and someone was accused for the murder, and Pippa, as well as the brother of the person who was accused of the murder, don't think maybe that it was that person. So she is set to try and figure out what actually happened to Andy and solve the mystery. So it was a wonderful YA mystery. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see where Pippa goes, and this one takes place while she's in college. The next book that I wanted to get to was A Long Petal of the Sea by Isabel Allende, I believe. Sorry, Isabel. And it follows two young people as they flee the aftermath of the Spanish Civil War. And it's historical fiction. I love historical fiction, and this one sounded amazing, taking place in the 1930s. I feel like that's a little bit different than the novels we usually get. There's of course a ton of historical fiction that comes from World War II, but I really want to read from different time periods, and I have a few books that are either coming out this last year or upcoming that kind of fit that bill, and I'm really excited for. The two young people we are following is a young pregnant widow by the name of Rosier, and she is traveling with Victor, who is an army doctor and coincidentally the brother of her late husband. And they go along with about 2,000 other refugees onto a ship, which is taking them to safety in Chile. The next one that I wanted to get to but just didn't was a book I actually picked up on a whim at Barnes & Noble with my birthday gift cards. It is The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. This is yet again another historical fiction, and I hadn't really heard much about it. I just saw the cover, thought it looked really cool, and then read the blurb and it sounded interesting. And it also felt very fitting for 2020 because it deals with a pandemic. And in fact, it is in 1918, it is the flu pandemic of that time. And it follows a nurse named Julia. She works in the maternity ward while all of this tragedy is happening. I've heard wonderful things about it, so I can't wait to get into it in 2021. And hopefully the pandemic part feels less real. I hope it just goes away and we don't have to worry about it, and then I can really get to this book in peace. Next on the list is Conjure Women, and it is by Afia Adekora. And it's kind of a magical story, a little bit like magical realism, has definitely a hint of fantasy from what I can tell. And it's about a mother and a daughter who have healing powers and can also create curses. And it follows different generations and takes place in the US in the South, both before and after the Civil War. I've never read any fiction that takes place during that time period, especially in the South, so I'm very interested to see what happens. I've heard it has really wonderful like familial bonds, and I love fantasy and magical realism, so it sounds like it's just up my alley. A nonfiction book that I really wanted to get into but didn't is Caste, The Origin of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. This book was all over Instagram and it was part of the book of the month, and I skipped on it because I just thought, oh, it's another nonfiction book. And I do like some nonfiction, especially memoirs, but fact-based or history-based nonfiction can be a little trying for me. I've pretty much given up hope that I'm gonna get through The Splendid and the Vile this year, so we're gonna have to try again next year. But like I said, it's amazing writing. It just I like a good fictional plot to keep me interested, and I like listening to audiobooks that are nonfiction. Something about a physical book that is nonfiction I tend to have some problems with. But moving back to Caste, and this is about an unseen phenomenon in America, especially, of a hierarchy of how the humans who live here are essentially sorted and treated. And this can involve anything from your race to your economic class, and sometimes those things are linked. And the author also goes into those systems in India and pulls in examples from Nazi Germany. So I can't wait to see how all those things combine, and I'm definitely going to get my hands on it next year, whether it's in physical or audiobook. A book of the month book that I didn't read was Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. And this is about a couple named Amanda and Clay. They live in New York City and take a long weekend trip out to Long Island to get away from the city. And they go with their teenage son and daughter. They are relaxing, having a good time, and all of a sudden they get a knock on the door at night. And it is the couple who owns the cabin they are renting, saying that everything has gone terribly wrong in New York City. There's no power, there's no cell service, everything is going wrong, and they're here to take refuge in the cabin that they have to try and stay safe as well. And the family has to decide if this couple is telling the truth or if there's something nefarious going on. So it's kind of a mystery, it's a little bit of a psychological thriller, and it's one that I wanted to get to but will definitely be getting to next year. The next one I saw on a list of books that were coming out in September, and I saw this in August, and I immediately knew this was a book I needed to get my hands on at some point. And it is called 50 Words for Rain by Asha Lemy, and it sounded amazing. It takes place in 1948 and follows a young girl named Kamisa. She lives in post-World War II Japan with her grandparents, and that is because her mother abandoned her, and she comes to find out that she is the illegitimate child of a Japanese aristocrat and an African-American GI lover of her mother's. So that automatically puts her at a disadvantage because she has darker skin. Because of that fact, she has to get baths each day that are chemical baths to help lighten her skin. Once again, it's historical fiction, but this feels like it has to do more with like race, and it has a little bit of romance in it and family issues. It sounds amazing. One that I had on multiple TBR lists that I just never got around to reading was The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare. And it follows a 14-year-old Nigerian girl named Aduni, and she is dealing with life the best she can. She has been sold essentially as a child bride. She's then put into slavery, and multiple horrific things happen to her, but it's all about her life and how she deals with it, and it sounds so touching and heartwarming. I've heard amazing things about it, and I was just, I guess, waiting for the right time to pick it up, which is going to be 2020. Mark my words. Up next, we have The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Haro. It takes place in 1893, and there's no such thing as witches. They used to exist, but nowadays the only power women have is with voting, and this takes place in a town called New Salem, I'm assuming where Old Salem was. And some of the women that are part of this voter movement are turning to older texts and older practices to bring back witchery. The cover alone's pretty cool. I don't have very many white books, so I almost want this book just for its white cover. And only book lovers will get that. But I love a good story with witches in it any day, so bring it on. A YA book that I didn't get to was The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And it's been called kind of like a Cinderella story meets the movie Knives Out, with a little bit of murder mystery in there. And it follows a girl named Avery. All she wants to do is graduate high school, get a scholarship, and get out. When all of a sudden she suddenly inherits all of this money from a billionaire she didn't even know. In fact, she didn't even know who he was. So in order to get that new inheritance, she has to go move into the home of the billionaire. And unfortunately for her, it is filled with the family of the billionaire, who are very upset that they don't get their inheritance and this other random girl is. I loved the movie Knives Out. This sounds very similar actually, so I get why they called it that. And it sounds like Avery's gonna have to be pretty cunning to get out of that situation. One that I also saw going around that I'm pretty sad I didn't get to was a book called Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. And if it sounds like Hamlet, that's because they are connected, and this is supposedly the backstory of what Shakespeare based the Hamlet play on. and it suggests that Shakespeare's son Hamnet died when he was 11 years old, and thus the play was based on the son and that death. So it apparently follows the grief of a child, familial backstory, and all those things that are supposed to be really good. And I love Shakespeare. I love fiction that involves Shakespeare stories. There's a crappy novel that I liked whenever I was a teenager. I think it's called Interred with Their Bones or something like that. I haven't read it since I was a teen, but I remember really enjoying it, and it had to do with Shakespeare and like a lost play of his, or maybe his folio, unsure, but it had to do with like a thriller that had to do with literature. So I haven't read that, and I've heard it's kind of crappy. So maybe my taste as a teenager wasn't great, but I'm hoping this would give me that same Shakespeare backstory vibes. It would be better than that one. And the last book I want to talk about is called Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. And Hood Feminism is about the essentially inequality in the feminist movement, and how some of the things that we should be focusing on, like making sure there is economic equality for everyone, food availability, medical care that is equal among all races, and other racial issues that exist within the feminist movement, especially among white feminists. So it's very interesting. It's supposed to be very educational, very eye-opening. I read a few books this year that did talk about race, and I'd love to continue that education into 2021 and continue reading books that are focused on the equality of all races here in America and around the world. So I will definitely be getting to Hood Feminism next year. And that's going to be it for this list of books that I wished I had gotten to in 2020 and just didn't. If you liked the video, please like it so more people can find us. Subscribe for future videos. We are in the middle of Bookmas/Vlogmas. I have some pretty good ideas coming. I have a list down here, that's why I'm pointing. So I hope you'll stick around. Check out the description for more places you can find me on the internet, like Instagram, my blog, my second channel where we occasionally upload gaming videos, and more. Did you agree with any of these books? Did you read them or not read them? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I hope you have a wonderful rest of December. Bye.